Welcome to KCU, the home for college football in Canada. Let's start in Ontario, where it was the final week for the regular season where any one of 3 teams could squeak into the final playoff spot.
That is correct, Jim. Laurier, Toronto, and Ottawa all had their sights on the last available ticket to the postseason in the final week. But let's start things out in the Hammer, where the rampaging Western Mustangs took their undefeated record to Hamilton, where McMaster QB Asher Hastings needed 2 touchdowns to pass and break Hall of Fame quarterback Chris Flynn's all-time mark of 30 TDs in a season, which has stood for 26 years. Purple Ponies, Marauders at Ronnie J. Let's get to the big story with the game out of the Marauders' reach. QB Asher Hastings needed 1 touchdown pass to break the CIS single-season record. Late in the contest, he got his chance.
Asher Hastings with Kingsley Amanquah to his right. Hastings looking to the end zone. Has a man. It's Vandervoort. Touchdown, McMaster. It's number 31. It's the CIS record.
Hastings gets his 31st touchdown with less than 2 minutes on the clock. But despite the heroics, Mac takes this one on the chin from the Mustangs. Okay, so we all know what Hastings did, but let's give the Purple Ponies some love. The win seals first place in the conference and an undefeated season for Western. It was also head coach Greg Marshall's 100th career victory. Congratulations. Laurier and Queens. It was a sold-out affair in what would be the last homecoming at Richardson. First cue, Gales get the game's first major with this Jonah Pataki run from 6 yards out. It's 7-5 for Queens. Late in the queue, though, the wheels began to come off for the home side. Nate Hobbs gets forced out of the pocket. Matt Williams gets to him, forces the fumble. Rashari Henry scoops up the leather, and the big man sets his sights on the end zone. The D lineman goes 38 yards all the way to the house. It's 12-5. Laurier after the first cue. Late second cue, and the Jayhawks D puts up a few more points. They swarm Hobbs, who tries to get rid of it. A Laurier defender gets a hand on the leather, and it falls right into D lineman Asante Mazan's hands. The even bigger man rumbles his way to the house for a 30-yard pick 6. Laurier spoils Queens' homecoming and earns the 6th and final playoff spot in the OUA with a massive win on the road. Guelph, Carleton. Jacob Scarfone scored 2 touchdowns, including this one from 32 yards. Guelph shoots down the Ravens by 32. The Griffins finish second in the conference and get a bye to the OUA semifinals. This game was all about Gigi's pivot, Derek Wendell. Wendell tossed 4 touchdowns. He also threw for 564 yards, breaking the OUA record for passing yards in a game. That wasn't the only one he'd break on the day. The 4th-year senior gets the CIS all-time record for completions in a season, attempts, and passing yards. Windsor scraps out just 2 wins on the year, while Waterloo has just 2 since 2013. That is a wrap on the 2015 OUA season. Western and Guelph finishing 1st and 2nd, earning byes to the Yates Cup semifinals. The quarterfinals take place this Saturday on Halloween, with Queens hosting Carleton and McMaster hosting Laurier.
We were focused on the field with records, but a milestone was achieved on the sidelines as Greg Marshall notched up victory number 100 as a head coach. The guy knows how to build a program, but more importantly, he has the ability to think outside the needs of his own program and think about the overall good of the game. Now, a question to you, Sean. Well, maybe it's not a question, but a statement. We need more guys like Greg in leadership positions across the country, don't we?
Yeah, no, definitely. I think Greg Marshall is one of those few guys that's able to create a niche for himself within the coaching fraternity. He has enough credibility with his coaching record. He has a 10,000-foot perspective on the sport. He seems to be able to galvanize opinions and be able to relate to people. I sat in coaching meetings with him before, and even though a lot of those coaches are chasing the Western Mustangs in some meaningful form on the field, he's able to get them moving towards a common goal. Those kind of guys are rare. His personality is something that I think galvanizes, and we definitely need more of those type of people in football in Canada at all levels if we're going to move the sport forward.
Now, 2 records of note. What Derek Wendell of Ottawa put together with a record-setting season in terms of passing yardage, and Asher Hastings with his 31 TDs in 8 games, breaking Chris Flynn's 30 in 7. Is there any need for a Roger Maris-like asterisk on that one?
Well, an interesting comparison to be made with Chris Flynn playing the role of Babe Ruth, but there wasn't a need for Maris to have the asterisk, nor is there a need for Asher Hastings to have the asterisk. You play the season that you're presented with, and as the sport grows, the records just get rewritten. It happens in every single sport. Asher Hastings had a great year, as did the team for McMaster. I'd say exceeding pretty much all reasonable expectations, given how many men they had to turn over after last year's Vanier Cup finalist squad. But the guy I want to talk about a little bit is Derek Wendell, a guy who set not one but two all-time marks, both for yardage and completions in a season this year. And he had a phenomenal year with a team that finishes 3-5 and misses out on the playoffs entirely. What an interesting case for Wendell when you talk about the Heck Crichton conversation, because he's the type of guy that probably gets overlooked, despite the fact that statistically he probably had the best season of the bunch in the OUA. And it's just an interesting case where Derek Wendell suffers because his team is not the tops.
Thoughts on the opening round of the OUA playoff, Sean?
Well, I think there's two very interesting games. I think Queens versus Carleton is going to be a battle. Any game played in Queens is always interesting. They have some rabid fans there. The game that I want to see what happens in is Laurier versus Mac. That's a game that's replicating what they played 2 weeks ago. 9-point victory for Mac. In week 4, Coach Falls made a quarterback change. They went from Fracas to Morelli, and from that point on, that offense has been on fire. 43 points a game. Dylan Campbell has really found his stride again. Over 800 yards over the last 4 weeks. Very impressive stuff. Laurier is definitely capitalizing on that momentum created by that change, and it'll be interesting to see how it translates into the playoffs. I think if I was Mac, I'd be a little worried. They're going to have their hands full.
I got to agree with Coach here. I can't remember a year in recent memory where 3 through 6 in the OUA seems so tightly packed. And you can make a legitimate argument this weekend that both road teams could possibly be favored. Carleton having already won by 10 points at Queens earlier this season, and Laurier having played McMaster really tight and trending way upwards right now. With the Carleton-Queens game, Coach talked on the home field advantage. Unfortunately for Queens supporters, that myth was kind of smashed right out of the park by Laurier just last weekend. In Queens' homecoming of all games, they went in there and just dominated the Gales. And the question in that game, as we'll touch on later, is which of the two Queens teams is going to show up, because this team's been playing Jekyll and Hyde pretty much all season long.
Coming up, the Q and the A. Crown Produce secures produce locally and from around the world for Canadian retailers. Crown Produce is also proud to secure sponsorship of University football on Shaw. Crown Produce, supporting Canadian retailers and Canadian amateur football.
Hey everybody, welcome back to KCU. We move now from Ontario to Quebec, where last week our Jim Mullen told us that the second edition of the Aor Bowl would be the game of the week this past weekend. The Vert Aor just about beat Laval in week 2 at home, only to lose in overtime. However, winning at Peps is altogether a very, very different thing. Could the Green and Gold slay the Red Dragons on their home turf? Let's head out to Quebec City and find out. This is not the start the visitors were hoping for. Sherbrooke's first series, they're forced to punt the ball. Anthony Dufour fields the biscuit from his own 36, busts up the gut, and then looks to the sideline. Dufour goes 74 yards all the way to pay dirt, and just like that, it's 7-0 for the Red Machine. Dying seconds of the first half, Laval pivot Hugo Richard connects with Felix Faubert-Lucier with his 25-yard major. Laval takes a 19-7 lead into the poutine break. Third Q, more of the same from the Rouge et Or. This time Richard does it with his feet, scampers in with his 10-yard major. Laval runs away with a 36-7 win. 47th annual Shaughnessy Bowl between Concordia and McGill. Pick this one up in the second Q. Red men up 10-7. Stingers QB Trenton Miller to Justin Julien. That's a 19-yard major. Stingers take a 3-point lead. But McGill bounces right back with his flea flicker. Nick English flips the leather to Louis Brulette. The receiver shows off his arm, hitting a wide open Jonathan Mack. Johnny Mack takes it 52 yards all the way to the house. But the Stingers lead 33-21 at the recess. Shift to late in the fourth Q. McGill stuck 6. English to Yannick Langelier-Vanas. who hauls in his second major of the quarter to give the Redmen a 1-point lead. But in the dying seconds, Concordia kicker Keegan Treloar nails this 30-yarder, and that seals the win. McGill's playoff hopes killed by a last-second field goal. Take that, guy who chirped me on Facebook. The Caravan rolled by the Gators by 49. Though he didn't get the start, Montreal backup pivot Hugo Henderson was impressive in 3 quarters of play. So the playoff picture is a little bit clearer in the queue. This we know: Laval, Montreal, Sherbrooke, and Concordia are in. All that's left to be determined is the playoff seeding. All right, let's head over to Atlantic Canada now, where after a slow start to the season, the reigning 2-time conference champs Mount Allison have bounced back, winning their last 3 in a row. The Mounties were looking to make it 4 straight, facing a St. Mary's squad that hasn't won a game since October 26th. 2013. So to Sackville we go, where this one was all Mounties. Dylan Crosser picked off this Trevor Erdman deep ball and took the pigskin just about to the house. Crosser goes 85 yards, taking it to the Huskies' 7-yard line, where one play later, Idahosa York takes it in for the major. Mounties give the Huskies a 15th consecutive loss, taking this one by 31. Acadia, St. FX. Let's start in the last minute of the game. X down 5-0 to Vaughn Cook in the red zone. Looks to the end zone. Brandon Jennings from Acadia thinks he's got the pick. He's clearly out of bounds. So the X-Men get another crack at it, and they make it work. Cook to Randy Roseway for the win. X escapes a barn-burning 7-5 win. So with the win, St. FX maintains second place in the conference with a chance to finish first this weekend. So taking a look at the AUS standings now, Mount Allison, St. FX, and Acadia, they're all into the postseason. Mount Allison can earn a bye to the Loney Bowl final with the win over X this weekend.
Sherbrooke and Laval, defenses and depth winning the day for the Rouge et Or. But was it about putting up a respectable battle for Sherbrooke in Quebec City? The games that will matter for them are in the postseason, Sean.
You know what? To be honest with you, I was really disappointed with this outcome for Sherbrooke. I had some high hopes for them to create some intrigue down the stretch in Quebec, but they kind of laid an egg. And even though Laval's offense really seems to be struggling to put points on the board consistently, they were unable to capitalize and could not really muster anything up. And I think they have to be disappointed coming out of this game and a little unsure of where they stand in the Quebec Conference.
Certainly, and there are no moral victories in football, and certainly for Sherbrooke, I think they're a team that's kind of gotten past that point, or they look like they'd grown beyond that. And one of the troubling things for this Sherbrooke team is this is a team that is associated with its offense, and in particular its quarterback, and he has not produced a lot of points in the games versus the big boys in the queue. They've managed to pull out a few because of some timely defensive plays, but it hasn't been because Jeremy Rock's been able to shoot it out against these big Quebec boys, who they now have to go through in the playoffs. Because with this loss, they now have to visit Montreal at Montreal, and then they have to go to Quebec City potentially after that, and then they have to go to London, Ontario for the Western Mustangs potentially after that. That's one heck of a road for them to get to the Vanier Cup.
Coming up, X's and Olsen breaks down the Purple Ponies. Crown Produce secures produce locally and from around the world for Canadian retailers. Crown Produce is also proud to secure sponsorship of University football on Shaw. Crown Produce, supporting Canadian retailers and Canadian amateur football.
Hey everybody, thanks for sticking around to KCU. It's time again for class, but not just any class. It's time for football class with another edition of X's and Olsen with the former CIS offensive lineman Gord Randall and former UBC head coach Sean Olsen.
Thanks, Ryan, and welcome to X's and Olsen, where we are going to talk to you a little bit about the OUA? we are going to talk about the Western Mustangs. The Western Mustangs, who have led the country in rushing 5 years straight and are top 3 in yards in all those 5 seasons as well. Now, Will Finch gets the headline for the Mustangs as their stud quarterback, but the running attack doesn't have as many big names because it's a committee. And one of the greatest things you can say about an offensive scheme is when it becomes personnel proof. And this is an example. The Western Mustangs are excellent at bringing innovation to an old school rushing scheme based on a gap blocking scheme. And Coach Olson, we're going to show these guys a little bit about what a gap blocking scheme is compared to a zone blocking scheme that we see most teams run. What does Western do to make that so effective?
Well, I'll tell you what, this is old smash mouth football, nothing fancy, predicated on 2 simple principles: numerical advantage, trying to bring numbers to the play side of the run, and angles, giving their blockers angles to be able to move defenders and create horizontal and vertical creases. This first play here is a simple counter tray, old school counter tray, but with a twist. Right here, they're going to pull the center. It's down block, okay? Protect your gap. Down block, and they're going to pull and lead the fullback from the backside. Old school mentality with the front side handoff, okay? A traditional play that's been effective. Let's roll this forward. You'll notice the front side down blocks here. Not a beautiful job by the guard, but you've got a nice down from the edge, creating a crease, and they're off to the races. The next clip we have here is going to be an old school power G. This stuff, I love seeing this stuff on film. Great football play. Again, bringing angles and numbers to the party. Let's take a look here at this play. Right here, you've got 2 fullbacks in the game. Who the heck in Canadian football uses 2 fullback? Well, I'll tell you what Greg Marshall does. You've got a simple down blocking scheme. Again, down block. We're going to pull the backside guard, and we're going to take care of the front side with the fullback. The thing that they add to the mix here is the backside guy. It ends up looking a lot like counter because he follows the guard up the hole. That's 2 lead blockers. This is why it's so hard to handle. Let's roll it forward.
And you'll see here as you watch this play that they successfully overload this left side so effectively that pulling guard never actually has to block anybody. A really impressive scheme by the Mustangs, overloading that front side of the play that is very, very difficult to stop for a defense. All right, and now we're going to see another clip from that Queens game a few weeks back where we see some of the interesting innovation that the Mustangs have brought into this old school scheme. Take it away, Coach.
So here you've got yourself a counter tray, old school style, backside guard, backside tackle being the pull and the kick out and the lead guy. You have a slot leading and taking the ball, and you're going to bring the tail back to have an extra blocker to the front side. Fullback is still going to take care of the backside of the play, and now you've got an extra player. That's 1 more player than you normally have on counter tray. 3 lead blockers to the front side in combination with angle blocks. Let's roll this forward. This is a fantastic play to watch. You can take a look here. You've got old school smash mouth football bringing multiple lead blocks to the point of attack. Matt Urin is now physical ball carrier. They run it with multiple personnel. They have multiple people in the backfield. Very, very difficult for a defense to stop.
Very hard to key against who's going to get the ball there, what direction the ball is going in, all sorts of interesting stuff. And when the Western Mustangs add play action to this scheme, it becomes even more deadly to stop. But you'll have to stay tuned for next time to find that one out. Thanks, Brian. Back to you.
Thanks, fellas. And again, it gets better every week. Speaking of getting better, by the week, the UBC Thunderbirds have been on a steady climb in the Canada West standings after winning back-to-back games versus Alberta. Now they look to make it 3 in a row. However, this time they had to do it at a place that over the years has been a house of horrors for the UBC T-Birds. To Saskatoon we go, UBC and Saskatchewan. Plenty of pyro on display for this pivotal game for the hometown Huskies. Husky pivot Kyle Siemens making his first start in the CIS. On his first drive, he marches 84 yards on 10 plays, capping off the drive with his Mitch Hillis Major from 5 yards out. It's 7-zip for the Green Dogs. But big plays like this 89-yard bomb from Michael O'Connor to Ben Cummings proved to be the difference for the Birds in this one. UBC goes into Griffiths and wins for the first time since 2010, taking it by 5. Despite the loss, Siemens had a career day for the Green Dogs. In his first ever start, Siemens broke the conference single game records for completions with 44 and attempts with 67. Alberta, Manitoba. The Bisons coming into this one having won 3 in a row. Matt Halleck scored majors from 3 and 1 yard, while Jamel Lyles racked up 181 all-purpose yards as Manitoba give the G-Bears a 5th consecutive loss, taking this one by 22. The rookie Lyles continues to lead the nation in all-purpose yards, averaging a staggering 207.4 per game. Regina and Calgary. Here's what you need to know. Andrew Buckley tossed 2 touchdowns and ran one in himself as Calgary continues to dominate the Canada West, beating the Rams by 50. Dinos kicker Johnny Mark kicked 3 field goals, breaking the CIS record for career field goals. Mark now has 87 on his career. C-Dub standings time. Calgary, still unbeaten and still number 1. Who will get the 2nd seed and the chance to host a playoff game will be determined this weekend when Manitoba travels to Vancouver to face the Thunderbirds.
I love throwing these questions to Coach Olsen. Is the rework of the UBC Thunderbirds behind where they should be, since you can roll a lot of points on their defense? Is it right on time, since their recruits have led them to their first official plus 500 season since 2000, or ahead of schedule, since they seem to be gaining momentum at the right time? I love throwing these questions to the ex-coach.
Jim, you're going to get me in trouble here. No, I think they definitely have some momentum, and you can't watch them play and not be encouraged with how their young players are playing. I would take a little bit of issue with the sense that their recruits are the ones that are taking the forefront in this resurgence. I think Coach Nill has done a great job in getting the best out of his young, talented players. But let's be clear, that roster is filled with young, talented players. You have guys like Alex Morrison. You have guys like Levi Hua. You have guys like Dakota Shepley. You have guys on defense like Terrell Davis. Now, he's done a great job in putting them in the right spot and giving them confidence. But I would say outside of Michael O'Connor's, there hasn't been a ton of recruits that have come to the forefront the way that you'd like them to come to the forefront. I think one guy that I want to talk about a little bit is Quinn Van Gelswick. This is a guy that has been on fire for them. 19 field goals. That's tops in the country, I believe. And you have a 43-yard average. Those things make a difference with a football team who's young, who has talent, and to be able to set the table for that offense and that defense to do their work has been masterful from Quinn all year. I've been very impressed with how he's played.
Well, I have to say that I don't think the rebuilding job at UBC is quite as deep as some might make it out to be, with my coworker over here having been a pretty respectable recruiter himself. But unlike the jilted ex-employee over here, I am going to say that the UBC T-Birds are ahead of schedule in this rebuild. I said right from the very beginning of this season that this was not going to be a year-one job for Blake Neal. I thought that this wasn't going to click until at least year 2, when the UBC Thunderbirds would then be ready to knock on the door, integrating the new guys into the old guard. But as it turns out, a roster led largely by holdovers has this UBC team knocking on the door right away in year 1. That has surprised me. I thought they'd be more around the 4-4 mark, and if they finish second, I will safely say that they exceeded my expectations.
This weekend, it's the Bisons and the Birds at T-Bird. They will battle for 60 minutes to decide who gets home field advantage in the 2 versus 3 semifinal game, which you can see on Global TV nationwide. Now, this reminds me of the old 2-game total point playoffs in the CFL, because these two teams are going to meet again, Gord. These teams were in a schedule in the Canada West that met back-to-back teams and Thanksgiving. How is that different than what these teams face now, heading towards the playoffs and battling for home field?
Well, the clear difference is that it's the second game that's worth all the marbles between these two. So we talked during that back-to-back situation about how coaches might approach it. They might have some new twists for game 1, or they might keep it close to the vest. In this situation, you will clearly see coaches keep things close to the vest in this final game, because while that home field advantage is a big deal, winning that playoff game is a much bigger deal. So the guy that leaves more bullets in his chamber and uses them more effectively in that second game will win that second game most likely. So what you will see is you will see neither team show anything new this week. You'll see them run their base stuff. You'll see them try to win this game, but they're saving any of their tricks and any of their elaborate game planning stuff for next week when all the marbles are on the line.
I'll tell you what, I disagree, Gord. I think they are going to go balls out in this game. I think it is going to be a game where both of these teams are looking to win and win in convincing fashion. I think that home court advantage or home field advantage is a very important thing in the playoffs, especially when you consider the weather in Manitoba and the weather in BC. And I know for a fact the UBC Thunderbirds want to host a home playoff game to be able to say, hey, you know, the rebuild is done. This is going to be important to see how the special teams play out. That's where the difference in this game is going to be. Where does special teams lead this game? Offense and defense are pretty even. Lots of talent on both sides of the ball. Defense for both Manitoba and UBC has been suspect at times. Offense has been great at times. The difference here, I think, is UBC's kicking game, and I think that's what's going to put them over the top.
Before we get to the picks of the week, let's check out the Sked and the CIS FRC Top 10. Picks of the weekend, and as always, we send the opener over to Coach Olson.
I'm gonna go with the Laurier game again. I think Laurier versus Mac is very, very intriguing. Mac has got home field advantage. That's going to play a factor for sure. They're coming off of playing each other 2 weeks ago. 9-point victory for McMaster. I think McMaster has the edge in almost every meaningful category. Although I'll tell you what, that momentum with Laurier, that quarterback in Morelli, and Dylan Campbell has started to look like the leading rusher he was last year. If they can get that going and play even on the other three phases of the game, I think Laurier could end up being surprised here. My money would go on Mac, but I have a funny feeling that Laurier is going to make this interesting.
For me, it's Carleton Queens. The other playoff game this weekend is an obvious pick, and it's a really interesting matchup because, as I mentioned earlier in the show, Queens is the most Jekyll and Hyde team in this entire conference. This is a team that could run a competitive game with Western, that could beat Guelph, but could also barely beat York by a point, lose to Laurier at home. Which Queens team is going to show up? And the guy that leads that charge in terms of being Jekyll and Hyde is Nate Hobbs, a guy who, when the Queens team has underperformed, has been a turnover machine, but when they have performed well, has been a great game manager and has taken care of the ball. Look for Jonah Pataki to lead the rushing attack for Queens. Carleton came into Kingston and won earlier this season. I don't think Queens lets that happen again. So, in the tradition of last year, I'm going to put the old bucket back on. My pick is the Gales at home.
Nice. We got the dome going over to my right. Gordon Sean talked about it, so I might as well too. Manitoba at UBC to determine who will host the first round playoff semi in the West on Global TV nationwide. The big question here is injuries. Teo Dizar will be a game time decision with an upper body injury, and Jamel Lyles has been playing with a high ankle sprain, so you have to wonder what sort of effectiveness the Manitoba Bisons will have coming out of the backfield. Will it be a case of a team holding the cards close to their vest or going balls out, as Sean Olson said, with UBC and Manitoba? Home field advantage in the playoffs is going to be big. But for now, let's get out to the game.